says recording. Hi, everybody.
We are
Welcome to
recording.
our regular reunion, K1 reunion meeting. And we have a really illustrious cast of attendees here. And Kathy Stevens, as you all know, K what, Kathy? K7?
Hey, no, what? No, 35.
Whoa.
Ah,
Hey, sorry.
wow.
I wish
Sorry.
that was my age too, but it's not.
Anyway, Kathy was ambassador to Korea, and she's here with us. She joined us once before, and Ed Baker retired from Harvard University's Yenching. Uh, what do they call it? Yenching Society or Library or whatever.
Harvard Yenching Institute.
From the Harvard Yenching Institute, and they're both here with us today. And we'll have a discussion. And then do you want people to interrupt or wait till you finish?
Well, I think Kathy and I agreed that interruptions that are needed should be made.
Okay.
We,
Okay.
we,
So,
we'll rely on your judgment to decide whether you can hold your question.
okay.
Mhm.
All right.
Yeah,
Well, good.
I prefer a conversation, I think, because
Yeah.
otherwise it's going to be a long. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me set the view
Maybe
to multi-speaker, I think. Yeah, there we go.
with the lamp, the table with the lamp.
Okay, so we got Kathy and Ed Baker, Kathy Stevens, and take it away, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll start. Last Thursday night, uh, 2 days ago,
I'm gonna
I heard a talk at Harvard by Kang Kyung-hwa, who is a former foreign minister and UN official who is now the ambassador to the United States. And it was very impressive. And she is quite enthusiastic about her new president and gave a very upbeat explanation of everything he had said. And she did it all in 20 minutes. It was quite a tour de force. One of the things that I focused on was that she pointed out that Lee Jae-myung has quite a different attitude toward dealing with North Korea than Yoon Suk-yeol did. And he wants to engage. And I think his long range hope still remains unification. But in the meantime, he thinks that the kind of dialogue that used to happen under Kim Dae-jung should be restored. And I found that very heartening because I have worked for a long time at trying to do what little I could do to promote rational dialogue. And as things have gone on, for example, last year sometime, the Korea Society had a panel, 3 or 4 people, to talk about what the U.S. should be doing with North Korea. And they were all well-informed, good, rational people. Nobody said a word about let's try to restore the dialogue. And I wrote a note to Tom Byrne, who is also a former Peace Corps volunteer, who has just stepped down there as the director, and Jonathan Corrado, who tends to run the programs, speaking programs, and pointed this out. And I was complaining, but I don't think I was nasty about it. But they got quite upset with me. Many of you probably know that I've spoken there since, and we had a very nice engagement when we did. But anyway, you can see that I'm apt to get off on tangents, and there's an awful lot here that we're not going to really be able to get to. But if there's any chance to hear Kang Kyung-hwa, I strongly recommend that you take it. And I think she's quite committed to speaking in English to the American audience.
And I just interjected. I know that I was there too, and I know that was recorded. It was a Zoom session, and I know that it was recorded. So there must be
Yes.
some way of accessing.
Well, there may be. I have tried to do that in the past, and I'm an advisor to the Harvard Korea Institute, but I think I can get it. But for a while, they were recording them with the same idea that we have, that you record them, and unless something terrible happens, you put it online. But that is not what the Korea Institute is doing at this time. I think it may be because there are a lot of young scholars who haven't published yet their first book or their second book, and they don't want to have somebody steal the bacon. But anyway, it is worth trying, and I will be looking for it too. And if I find a way to do it, I will inform everybody in this group. Kathy, before I use up all the time, how about telling us something about the APEC conference that was just held at the end of October?
Yeah. Well, thanks, Ed. And yeah, it's great to see everybody. I do remember getting together with you. And after that, I was very kindly offered, I don't know if it was voted on, but a kind of honorary K1 perch at these Zoom meetings. And I keep meeting, but it's 8 p.m. in DC and it's almost my bedtime. So, but you made me stay up for this one. But it's really nice to see you all again. And I know that 2026, I think, is K1's Hwangap, I'm told. So I'm looking forward to putting on my hanbok and doing my bows or whatever I need to my Sunday there. But no, seriously, it's really great to see you all. And I mean, I want to get to the North Korea point, and I can do it in the context of, I guess, this very, kind of traditional diplomacy, right? Talking about all the meetings there have been, but I guess they're kind of important. But speaking of meetings about meetings, I mean, Ed, you mentioned Kang Kyung-hwa doing the lecture by Zoom, the Kim Gu lecture. Actually, yesterday in Washington, I was a busy day. I'm here in Washington right now, and it was again the Atlantic Council and the Korea Society, with support from the Kim Gu Foundation, did an all-day conference. So if you really want to up your YouTube hours, that's all on either the Korea Society or the Atlantic Council YouTube channel, and it's an all-day. There's like 5 different panels about U.S.-Korean relations. I'm thankfully only on one of them. I kind of kick it off with Phil Goldberg and Kim Hyung Jin, who's a former former diplomat, former Korean diplomat. But I wanted to mention in particular, actually, I mean, at that panel, at that conference yesterday, One, I had several people. I see David McCann is here, and several people asked me about you, David. And this is a sign of my, I guess, my creeping memory. I can't remember who asked me because I said I'm sure I'm going to see him tomorrow night and so I will know as soon as I remember sometime the next who it was asking. And I said, oh, I'm sure they're going to be there. So, but you and many are obviously thought of often and spoken of often, even if you don't hear it in the career world, which I was really immersed in yesterday with this conference. And then it was also, yeah, yesterday was National Day at the Korean embassy. I didn't make that intimate gathering of 1,000 or so people, but that's with Gang Kyung-hwa, the new South Korean ambassador. She was hosting it, and I'm not even sure what Korean holiday they were kind of pinning it on because basically they had to wait until she got it. They've had so many other things going on in terms of
Yes.
visits and everything. They just kind of had it yesterday. But yeah, of note about Gang Kyung-hwa is, let me just add a little bit to what Ed said, and so I know a lot of you know her, but she she was named a foreign minister under Moon Jae-in, and was not so involved in the North Korea part during those were the years, of course, the Trump outreach to North Korea. Her background was in mostly the UN and multilateral diplomacy, a little bit of an outsider in that, kind of in the world of North Korean experts. But I think it's very significant that she's been brought back as U.S. as ambassador to the U.S., and I think she'll do a great job there. She'd only been president of the Asia Society, not Korea Society, but Asia Society in New York for less than a year, I think, when
Yeah.
when Lee Jae-myung was elected and asked her to be the ambassador. I think she's a very good choice. Um, and yeah, that said, I guess my kind of framing for this is, we're now in, I guess, as we all know, coming up to almost 1 year of the first year of the second Trump term. Lee Jae-myung has been in office since June, coming to power in that special election, and being elected one day and taking the office the next. I'm always impressed with the Koreans. They can do this the second time they've done it in recent memory, right? And notwithstanding the fact that Lee Jae-myung has essentially, I mean, no, if you like, foreign policy experience, other than being governor of Gyeonggi-do, I guess when you have some significant U.S. military assets and others, an investment, I mean, certainly
Mm.
like a governor of a big state here would have some, would certainly deal with some U.S. related issues and foreign related issues, but he came to power without that being his strong suit, and coming to power with a Trump administration uh, putting a lot on the table, shall we say? I mean, remember, this is as you have, Korea going through that period of between November and June, to get to a presidential election, get through the impeachment, get to a presidential election. And in the meantime, Trump comes in and declares April as Liberation Day, which, among other things, of course, means that something the Korea-U.S. Free Trade Agreement is dead letter, as is all our trade agreements, and we're kind of back to that initial chart of what the tariffs are going to be. And of course, it's been as Ambassador Kim said yesterday, he said, we're now in forever negotiations. I don't think that's just Korea and the US. I think that's everybody with the US. But he really came to power with a lot of things in addition to whatever policy towards North Korea was going to be on the table. So Lee Jae-myung has, maybe just again a few opening comments in terms of Lee Jae-myung has been now to the United States twice in the last 6 months. It wasn't easy to get on Trump's calendar. It never is, I think, to get on a American president's calendar. But he wanted to make sure that this was August when he did get on President Trump's calendar and came to Washington. And one thing notable that he did was he stopped in Japan first. So he came. So one area I think of some continuity there's some between him and his predecessor Yoon, who is now in jail with the charges piling up every day, more and more serious. We can talk about that too if we want. I mean, they really are serious. But one area of continuity is that Lee Jae-myung wanted to demonstrate that he was going to try to continue with the rapprochement with Japan. Stopped in Tokyo, then came to Washington. That really helped him in Washington, I think, and if some of you watched, again, something else to watch, we can all, him sit down with President Trump in the Oval Office, where these summit meetings are so different now from those of us, back in the day, right, when you'd have like a very short, usually kind of just press opportunity, literally, and maybe take one lighthearted question, and then there'd go be a meeting. And now it's like they sit down in front of the cameras, and then they just hold forth. That's the meeting. It's all rolled into one. And President Lee uh, doesn't speak English. Right before the meeting started, there was something that President Trump posted on Truth Social about raids on churches in Korea, and something had to be done about this. To say that the Koreans were on high alert about all this would be an understatement. But when Lee got in there, I think we saw the skills of a Korean politician who rose from really the most humble of backgrounds, if you say, to be mayor of Songnam and governor of Gyeonggi-do in a democratic system, and now president, because he was very skillful. He was very skillful. And I think President Trump had come into that meeting, notwithstanding his tweet just an hour earlier, thinking this was going to be a positive meeting, and it was. They didn't settle very much, but they got off to a pretty positive start. And then, of course, President Lee was back in the U.S. to go to the UN General Assembly in September. I did have a chance, I don't want to exaggerate it, but I did have a chance to meet him on both occasions. One at a dinner in Washington after he gave a speech with about 15 other people there. So it was a large table, but where we could talk. But to give you a sense of who was there, I was one of the younger people in the room. So it was it was kind of nice for a change. But he's young, but EJ Myung himself is a youngster.
One of the
He's
younger people in this room too.
in fact, I can't resist the Peace Corps volunteers. Maybe it's a little naughty of me, but when I met him, because I had not met him before. I had tried to meet him, but I had never had the chance. But when I did have just a private greeting with him, I did greet him in Korean, and when it was kind of my turn to say something, and this is a little bit cheeky of me, but I said, President Lee, if because he had made some reference to how he had grown up, and I had said, well, if uh, I was in Korea in the 1970s, and because he talked about education, I said, I was teaching middle school, and you could have been one of the students in my class. Because I was teaching in a boys' middle school, and so he remembered that. And then when I saw him at a much smaller dinner, it was only 3 or 4 of us there with him, where he really was impressive in the way he listened. He actually then addressed me as Shimon-kyung Sensei-nim. Someone had told him what my Korean name was, and said to me afterwards he could remember it all. So, because I have a good politician, I'm not, it's like Clinton or something. I always remember something. He said, and he said to me in Korean on the side, he said, "Well, actually, I couldn't have been in your class because you were in Chungcheon Namdo, and I'm from Gyeongsang-guk." So he had me, but anyway, um, anyway, he's a very skilled, I would say, politician, and it's something that he has been able, I think, to many people's in Washington surprise. It kind of, it translates, if you like, and transcends, translates into Washington and transcends some of the cultural barriers that are sometimes there. In any event, the other meeting that, as Ed referenced, the thing I guess is kind of the latest news or the latest development in the relationship is, of course, President Trump's trip to Korea just 2 weeks ago, October 29th and 30th, I guess. So yeah, but God, it seems like a long time ago, but about 2.5 weeks ago, with Korea, this year hosting the Asia Pacific Economic Conference, the summit, the APEC summit, which they decided to do in Gyeongju, and this was decided long when President Yoon was still in power, and so of course it's a huge logistical thing to have a summit because it's supposed to be all the leaders from from throughout the Asia Pacific. And the hosts, whoever they are, but certainly the Koreans are very, very eager to get, in particular, the American president and the Chinese premier there. Xi Jinping had not been in Korea for 11 years. 11 years. And so was both, I guess, for the Koreans, a blessing and a big, big challenge to then in Gyeongju, where I heard repeatedly, they're not good enough hotels for anybody, and how can they do this? And this is going to be a disaster. But they all got to Gyeongju, and the Koreans had the multilateral APEC that they hosted. President Trump came in for what was billed as a state visit, which is be more bells and whistles, lots of bells and whistles, lots of, those are the ones you'll remember from Peace Corps too, and later, where if it's a state visit, they have to put up the flags, of both countries on like every corner. So I don't even know what the exact order was with the APEC summit, but basically one day was a Trump state visit, and the next day was a Xi Jinping state visit. So I kept thinking of all those workers who had to go down and take down those flags really quickly and then put them up and and get the kids out there, because they had to do all that. Anyway, that may all seem kind of superficial, but just in protocol conscious things, those things can go awry there, and none of them really did. I know that here in the United States, the biggest news from the Trump Lee summit this time seemed to be the fact that President Trump was given a Sheila crown. And I did enjoy some of the exchange some people have had about the meaning of that. You can fill me in on that. But it did seem to go over very well with President Trump. And I think it was well done. I don't think that she got a crown. I don't know what he got. Maybe some of you know.
He certainly wouldn't get a crown. No,
Yeah, no, I wouldn't think so. But it played well with Trump. The new Japanese prime minister was there. Of course, there's a new prime minister there too, and someone who is considered to be to the right of Abe, if that's possible, or certainly aligned with him, and made many visits to Yasukuni Shrine, and may well do that again. So I think there will be a real kind of test of how resilient this rapprochement is between Seoul and Tokyo if she does take some more aggressive measures. But I think we can get more into that if you want. I mean, I think right now, given all the other challenges that Seoul faces, I mean, even public opinion is at the point where it's ready to suck it up a little bit. Maybe we're recording. Maybe I shouldn't put it that way, but I think there's an understanding of how important it is. Sometimes not seen in Washington, but in both Tokyo and Seoul, and ever this how important people in I mean both the publics and leaders in both capitals feel that they kind of work together, given the unpredictability, if you like, if you can call it, coming out of Washington. In fact, I'll mention here something I learned at this conference. You learn the most interesting things on the sidelines at these conferences. Yesterday, from a Korean participant who come, and he said, since we're recording, I won't say who it was, but he said, so there was a paper that came out from Seoul National University that identified South Korea's four key risks, major risks that it faces in terms of geopolitics, I guess, and they were listing as people for some reason. So it was Kim Jong-un. Oh no, actually, first it was Putin. I'm not sure if they were going in order, but that's the order he gave me. So Putin, what happens, in Europe and in Ukraine, Russia, and how Putin, Xi Jinping, Kim Jong-un, and then I said, oh well, and of course I know the fourth one has to be Trump. And they said, but we realize we can't call an ally a risk. So we said an uncertainty. But I guess the four things they're most worried about, and I'm not sure it's in that order, but that was, I think that's pretty accurate, and not and quite understandable. I think sort of assessment of some of the things they're looking very closely at. In any event, yeah, they got through the summit. Trade, obviously, and whether or not the tariffs are going to go up or down, the investment in the U.S., whether there's how much more the Koreans need to commit to. I mean, it really, and I'm going to. To me, it's kind of all part of the security. It's kind of protection money away, but how much more, in addition to what they've already committed through kind of the CHIPS Act or the Inflation Reduction or their own commercial decisions but how much more they're going to commit, who's going to make the decisions about that. This was a big issue for the South Koreans because they were following on the Japanese and others who'd agreed to commit certain amounts of money, I mean billions, hundreds of billions of dollars, without really specifying how that would be apportioned, who would decide, and so on and so forth. And the Koreans kind of wanted to get things written down, and they were also very worried about the figure that was what that Washington, the Trump administration, was insisting on, which is around $350 billion. And the Koreans were saying, with justification, I think, that they would they don't have those kinds of foreign currency reserves. You know, they can't make that kind of commitment. And I think that finally won the day in a way, and they agreed to 20 billion per year. But yet, a lot of details still to be worked out. Back to the forever negotiation. But in any event, a general framework was agreed to, which was a great relief to the Koreans. I think it allowed also President Trump to come back, not to say with a successful summit, not only with Xi Jinping, where again, in many ways was kind of back to status quo ante on some of the Chinese stuff, but some progress made with the Koreans. And finally, yesterday, a fact sheet came out.
Yes.
And, it's another thing just to note. And I'm trying not to say this, and how do you, in a normative or judgmental way, I guess, but kind of back in the old days, like 10 years ago or 5 years ago or pre-Trump, if you did a summit, usually, the statement was all negotiated beforehand. There'd be a joint statement that comes out and all the words. So basically, by the time the two leaders met, maybe there'd be, one particular part that needed to be worked out or some words, but basically it was done. Now it's let's see what happens. And then the fact sheet, it's not even a joint statement, it's just a fact sheet came out yesterday, which is very helpful and says, okay, this is kind of what we decided and this is where we're going. But still a lot to be decided. And this will be my last point. But just for example of the kind of, there's so many issues, but a new issue that's kind of on the table now, which it was really unclear to everybody what if anything was agreed between President Trump and President Lee himself. And this is on the question of South Korea obtaining nuclear fueled submarines, right? Because you'll recall well, one, I mean, just as background, Australia and the UK and the US under the Biden administration reached an agreement for Australia to obtain nuclear fueled submarines. And again, this is a many years long project. And North Korea says they have nuclear fueled submarines. I've heard a Korean refer to them as Frankenstein submarines. I mean, I've never wanted to get on a North Korean submarine of any kind, but they have one that's put together from others of their submarines and say that it's nuclear. In any event, the South Koreans said, we want them. And to do this, there would need to be cooperation from the United States, at least in terms of enrichment of nuclear fuel and reprocessing. But there seemed to be a complete disconnect in what President Lee thought they'd agreed to and what President Trump said, tweeted about afterwards, because he tweeted that the South Koreans had agreed that they were going to build nuclear submarines at the Philly shipyard in the United States as part of make shipbuilding great again. There are red hats you can get, make America shipbuilding great again. And on the one hand, that sort of fits into the shipbuilding thing. But on the other, apparently, Philly shipyard, I mean, the closest thing that they've made to a submarine in many, many years is like a little fishing boat or something. I was away. I mean, it's not big enough. It's just not. And it wasn't what the Koreans thought they'd agreed to. They thought they'd agreed to negotiations they need to do with the U.S. in the area of nonproliferation with respect to how they can enrich and use it. So the fact sheet kind of addresses that and kind of doesn't, but that's just an example, I think, of the things, because it's still to be worked out. Anyway, in any event, clearly, I think the mood in the Trump administration is the Deputy Secretary of State came to the conference and made some remarks is we want to reassure the South Koreans, reassure other allies that we want to make this a strong partnership. He used a lot of language that successive administrations have used about how it's the linchpin and praised Korea's approach. But a lot of uncertainty and a lot of work still to do. So let me stop there.
I strongly recommend you look up that fact sheet. The White House apparently has a regular practice of issuing fact sheets, and they call this a joint fact sheet. And the implication is clearly that it was worked out between
Yeah, no, I
both.
think it was, and I can say so. This is a joint fact sheet, and it was. I mean, I have it in front of me. Um, I imagine that the Korean one probably doesn't stay at the top. The Democrat shutdown is officially over, um, but I think it is a joint fact sheet, and in fact, I mean, as again an indication of how important I mean this relationship is. And again, this is no surprise to any of us, and how closely the Koreans follow the U.S. Korea relationship. Lee Jae-myung gave a live press conference specifically about the fact sheet a couple of hours, so basically yesterday morning, our time, to go over it. And also, I guess I would say Lee Jae-myung is getting very high marks domestically for his handling of foreign policy. That could change, but he's even Chosun Ilbo and some of the more conservative outlets. Again, we can get to North Korea perhaps in a minute, but they're giving him good marks for handling a very volatile and complex situation quite well. And I think high marks go to something is, sometimes not emphasized so much, I think, in Korean politics, but they really do draw from, dare I say, former diplomats and experts. Wee Sung-nak, who some of you may know, is a longtime former ambassador to Russia, longtime Korean diplomat, is the national security advisor. The foreign minister is another long career Korean diplomat who was most recently the permanent representative in New York. So some of you may have met him there, ambassador to India. And certainly when it comes to, again, inter-Korean issues within his party and within his government, there are figures who would want to push more and do push more for trying to engage with, and that's leading me to the North, for trying to engage with the North. But it's not a very propitious time for it. And so again, now I'm saying the other thing I guess I left out of my account of the Trump visit to Korea, and of course he stopped in Malaysia first, and but he clearly, again, I think it was pretty. It was never. It was almost again, and this almost said officially. He almost essentially said it. Yeah, if Kim Jong Un wants to come down to the DMZ and meet me, I'm ready. And I mean, in my mind, somewhat embarrassingly, I
No
wouldn't say what's that
response.
word. I wouldn't say he was ghosted, but they didn't. He didn't get any kind of like positive reply. And I think right now, North Kim Jong Un is just not quite ready. Uh, and when it comes to South Korea, I don't think there's very much interest as well. I mean, I'm sure many of you will have seen. It was a few months ago now that North Korea changed its constitution, changed its setup to basically say we're not interested in unification anymore. I mean, I personally don't think that's the last word on it, but they're pretty serious in the way that they're trying to institutionalize that as the official policy of DPRK. And if you're not seeking reunification, this is South Korea is just another enemy state. And at this point, also, I think with North Korea having really deepened its relations with Russia, and that becoming a very, very important economic and security connection for them, along with warmer relations with China. I think we're back to something more like pre the 1970s and previously than what we see more recently.
The fact sheet makes me think of throughout. It's a long document, and throughout there are references to the unfair treatment of American corporations in Korea, that non-tariff barriers and so forth. And there are points at which you would expect to find the parties agreed, or North Korea and the United States took the position that it's all blaming Korea. The tone of it, and even the way it is stated, it clearly puts all the blame on the Korean government and the Korean side. And it's the Georgia case, which I think we were all quite aware of, uh, isn't even mentioned. So right at the point where they're saying we should take down these non-tariff barriers and not mistreat and the American investors, there's an outstanding example of two foreign investors, Hyundai and LG, being pretty seriously mistreated, and not to mention the serious mistreatment of 475 people who were rounded up. And there it is. And they issued today a second fact sheet. And that's what it's all about. It's short, and it just is about taking down the unfair tariff barriers and discrimination against the United States.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that this fact sheet doesn't have all the, you know, the traditional structure you say of like a joint statement of the two leaders, which is more emollient, I would say. I
Yeah.
mean, uh, non-tariff barriers exist in both countries, and traditionally, but within the context of actually, and this is we had the former trade minister at our conference yesterday, and she made this point quite well when one of the former Trump officials was there saying, "Oh, this is all about reciprocity and so on." And she said, "Hey, you know, there was something called the U.S. ROK Free Trade Agreement, and under that,
Yeah.
which the South Koreans, in terms of tariffs, are still abiding by, the tariffs of U.S. products going into South Korea are mostly at zero. That's what the Chorus FTA did." And one of, just as a kind of a side note, I think one of the reasons, not just with Korea, but worldwide, we have not seen the outbreak of the kind of trade war that many people thought we would have with the beginning of these, you know, with tariffs becoming such a centerpiece of President Trump's policies, is that our trading partners have been very restrained. They have not to date really retaliated. I mean, it's China's the one country that threatened to retaliate, and generally, and again, that's why there was kind of a backing off, if you like, when of Trump on his own demands, I think, when he met with Xi. But one thing, so I'm not surprised to see non-tariff barriers mentioned, and it's certainly an area that I think under any administration that in the United States, it would want to work with Koreans on. And you know, they're I mean, it gets into also this idea of you know, the U.S. doesn't really like it when other countries kind of gang up and have the same regulations. Like we have the same thing with the EU, and we call these non-tariff barriers. But one thing the Koreans, I think, really kind of cleverly got into this fact sheet is a mention of the Korea-U.S. Free Trade Agreement.
Yes, they did.
Because the Trump administration would like to just have complete amnesia. You know, what free trade agreement? That never existed. Well, I mean, international law, it has the force of a treaty. You know, we pass it a little bit differently in the United States, but it is passed by the Congress. It's the force of law. But, you know, they just wanted to have that in there, even though basically it has been set aside on the United States side. And what South Korea has tried to settle for, as everybody else has pretty much, is not getting a worse deal than anybody else. So because they figure if, you know, if Japan is at 15% tariffs and, you know, most of the EU and Australia, wherever, then Korea can still compete, right? But if, you know, if they get whacked at 20% higher, then they've got a real problem. But they're all resigned to living in a world of higher tariffs,
Yeah.
and hoping to get, you know. But if I could say something about the Hyundai Visa case, you're right. I guess I didn't see that mentioned there. I mean, I will say this, and is in no way, I mean, I'm pretty appalled by this defense of what happened. Um, I mean, this, it was just so appalling. I mean, I have to say there's a lot of appalling things going on, but
Yeah.
this ICE raid on this enormous multi-billion-dollar plant that Hyundai and LG are building in Savannah, and all these people handcuffed and taken off and detained in these horrible facilities, and it inflamed Korean public opinion
Yes.
in a way that has not occurred since, I mean, maybe the two schoolgirls, or maybe I would say it was even bigger than that in terms of being more immediate. I can't really, every fact, but it was huge. And the Korean government, kind of negotiated to have them return, not, I mean, Washington did realize, the White House realized they kind of goofed, right? But that doesn't really help when you still got, two or three, 200 or 300 people down there in handcuffs and basically being told, well, just never mind. And the Korean said, I mean, the Korean government had to demonstrate it was protecting its citizens. And so it negotiated, if you like, a release and a, Korean airplane, and they are not going to go home in handcuffs. I mean, I think that honestly, I think the Korean government just thought this would be I mean, their government could fall. Why aren't you protecting Koreans overseas? And this is our ally. So all these, everyone, and actually a lot of the workers were given a choice of not having to leave, but they all said, I just want to go. So I think it was
Only one
one
stayed.
last state. Okay, so they all left, and this was a blanket, wall-to-wall coverage on Korean media for days and days, so and I, and even even here in Washington, people understood there was a problem, and they heard from the companies, of course, as well. And so they did send the deputy secretary of state, the number two at the State Department, and he went out there and he did, he said it was regrettable, it shouldn't have happened. We're going to set up a committee in the embassy. We're going to make sure that, but in fact, the visas these people are on, I mean, they're the same visas, they're either visa waiver program or what they call the B1, B2. They're temporary visa programs. That's just the way, we don't have a very supple visa system. That's not breaking news for anybody. So, and a lot of people don't want to come back. So this is uh, this was a huge shock. And I did note the deputy secretary when he spoke yesterday, and came over. I think one of the reasons he came and gave a little speech at our conference, honestly, was part of his job still now is to kind of help to clean that up. And he did make a point in his speech of saying not once but twice how regrettable it was that this happened, that where the U.S. or the Trump administration is going to put the things in place to ensure that these workers, these engineers, they're can come and help to build this. But I'm sure you've noticed, not to get too much in domestic politics, we always do, but this notion of the foreign skilled workers, is becoming a bit of a flashpoint within the MAGA and within Trump's base, I think. So it's these companies are going to be looking at it very, very closely, because it's going to slow down the building of these huge plants.
Apparently, there's nobody in the United States who can install this equipment and teach other people how to use it. And those people were here and are among those who went back. And
Right.
they may be the only, who knows how broadly that information is available in Korea. Probably not very broadly, even among skilled engineers.
Yeah, I mean, this is, we haven't built, this is not Korea specific, but I read a really good article. It's I don't know if it's a Substack or what, called Rest of World. It's run by Sophie Schmidt, who's Eric Schmidt's daughter of Google, who once went to North Korea. But anyway, this is an article about TSMC building a huge semiconductor plant in Arizona. I'm from Arizona. A lot of the same problems. I mean, not so much on the visa side, although that's implicit in a lot of it, but just in terms of yeah, I mean, it turns out it's a lot harder to build a semiconductor plant, which is why we haven't done it for a long time, than it is to build I don't know, a car part factory or something. So I think it's very slow. All these projects are going very slowly.
One of the things that came up in this fact sheet that Kathy has mentioned is the chorus agreement between the U.S. and trade agreement between the two countries. But the way it's raised in the statement at one point anyway is that the tariffs have been set at 15%. And if the chorus treatment and most favored nation, a term that I haven't heard for a long time. That's a very common 19th century diplomatic term. If those tariffs are higher, then the 15% is going to be raised to whatever that percentage is.
Yeah.
And so it's probably the case that wouldn't. I was very surprised to see the chorus mentioned at
I
all.
mean, my understanding is that's mainly just because the Koreans wanted to have it in there somewhere so they could say it
Yeah.
wasn't.
Well, it was probably smart of them to do so. The gold crown is something that I kept thinking about. Uh, the My first reaction was, well, it's not real gold. You know, well, I was wrong, that's for sure. It is a kilogram of gold,
Oh,
which is worth $170,000 or something at the current price. And I think, I thought that there was somebody who was capable of making these duplicates. But the only ones I had ever noticed before or heard of before were museum pieces. They were given to museums or sold to museums. They're in museums in Korea. You can
well,
the
but they
crown.
used to have these. I mean, they used to have these knockoffs, right? I mean, I got a couple of knockoffs, right?
Yours weren't gold.
I don't think so.
Plastic,
Well, you
plastic.
better be sure before you throw them away.
Charles is raising his.
Could I just ask a quick question? Kathy and Ed, could you remind us about the chorus when it was issued and uh, generally what's in it?
Yeah, I can do a quick. I mean, so the negotiations for the chorus FTA started under the Roh Moo-hyun and George W. Bush administration. So like back in about 2004, and the negotiations took about 3 years.
Oh,
They reached agreement, and this was a period when Korea's whole strategy was they're going to get free trade agreements with everybody they can, and part of this was an effort to kind of reform their own markets, kind of like the Japanese do, to create the conditions to really because they to stay competitive, but they wanted, and they certainly wanted one with the U.S. So Nomihan, and notwithstanding, progressive president, also wanted to demonstrate the importance of the U.S. ties. So negotiations started about 2003, 2004, was concluded in 2007. I remember because I was there when they signed it.
Yeah.
But that was right before the election. It didn't get, so it was signed by both governments, Korea, but then it had to go to Congress for ratification. We had elections in both countries, new presidents. It did not get ratified until 2012, and it went into force in 2012 or 2013. So basically, it was in force for about 10 years. Uh, in the first Trump administration, he came in again, I mean, saying these were all terrible deals. Of course they were. Somebody else did them. And but he improved it. I mean, there was a negotiation, which was fine, and there were some amendments made, which did go into, digital trade and other things that had changed. And much as with NAFTA, right? A sort of new improved, Trump seal of approval, Chorus FTA, was agreed to in 2015, I guess, during the first Trump term. Uh, but yeah, this all bets were off this time, right? So whether it was all any of our free trade agreements, but the Chorus FTA was for Korea its largest free trade agreement to date. It also has one with the EU, but this is the largest. And for the US is our largest one at that time since NAFTA. So it was very significant. Um, and it did, it did uh, I mean, the other thing is, I mean, U.S. tariffs were already pretty low, right? But what it did is it brought Korean tariffs down to zero on most things, and really opened up the Korean market to a lot of like American fruit and wine, but also services, uh, uh, services markets or law firms, insurance, finance. Um, so yeah, it's still, at least, I mean, in theory, the law of the land, but it's just been, voluntarily, I guess you'd say, superseded by these other negotiations.
Seeing Bob Baskerville sitting there makes me think of the fact that one of the ways that the United States investors are and Americans trying to work in Korea are being defended is by recognizing the attorney-client privilege, which I didn't realize was not existing in the Korean legal system, but apparently
Oh, that's
that's
interesting. That's interesting. I didn't know that either. I should also add, because maybe I'm making it sound like, I mean, it's all about, how things have changed since, Trump came back for his second term, and obviously it's been pretty seismic. But the trend, and I mean, I think we're all very aware of this. I mean, the trend, I think, in the US for the past decade or so has been towards, I mean, away from what, globalization is a bad word. Free trade is even not such a great word. Industrial policy is something that the Biden administration, embraced with great enthusiasm, and passed the inflation, the so-called Inflation Reduction Act, but basically spurring guided investments or encouraging guided investments, and the CHIPS Act in the same way for companies. And the Koreans went all in on this during the Biden administration. Um, in large part because they wanted to, get behind the protectionist walls, which they, worried, and rightly, that whether Trump came back or not, were inevitably kind of starting to go up. Um, so this was a kind of a hedging strategy on the part of these big Korean companies. And of course, and that's good. And Korea, South Korea did have, I mean, for several years, 20, I guess 22, 23 of the Biden administration was started had made the largest commitments of inward investment to the United States of any country. Um, Now there's, so now that's still something they're glad. I think overall they're glad they did, because it's part of this long-term strategy. But a couple of things have happened obviously since then, and one is that some of the investments they've made were in things like lithium batteries and EVs, which now some of the regulatory breaks around that are changing under the Trump administration. And secondly, when they come up with these, we're all talking hundreds of billions of dollars, and it's kind of, what have you given me lately, and is it coming from the private sector, the government? But if the Korean government says, well, Hyundai has committed $50 billion, I'm just pulling out to build this new EV factory or lithium battery or whatever it is, um, it's sort of like, well, that doesn't count. We want 200 billion to be determined where it's going to go later. So it's the whole thing is a bit of and you will see people in Washington, these think tanks from the Trump administration, previous Trump administration, say this on the record. It's just like, just come up with a good number. I mean, just come up with a number that sounds good, and we'll work out the details later. We just have to have a splashy thing. But obviously that makes our partners a little nervous, and I think the Koreans more nervous than most. And I think the Europeans, and again, we heard this from a Korean diplomat on the record last night. He said, "Oh, the Europeans were just saying, just sign something, a few $100 billion, and 3 years from now, you can, it'll something else will happen." But that's a little. The Koreans have a little kind of trouble with doing that with the U.S. because it's their security too. I mean, I think
Sure.
Yeah.
this is paying for their security.
well, one of the things that came out of the APEC meeting was that Lee Jae-myung had two summit meetings, one or maybe more, but one with Xi Jinping and one with Trump. And it's presented in the newspaper, Chungang Daily, as uh, restoring its potential economic growth rate being the most important policy of the government. And I read on, and it's the Bank of Korea says that it is now 2%. And I haven't associated such a uh, low growth rate with Korea anytime recently. I think it was probably that or lower uh, when we were Peace Corps volunteers. But
Well, maybe you guys, maybe in the 60s it wasn't, but yeah, it
but
was.
it was much higher. Yes.
Yeah.
That's what I had come to expect. I think that's what we had all come to expect. And so I was taken with.
Well, I mean, it's been considerably lower for some years, and of course, I mean, I went back to Korea as ambassador in 2008, and because that was the year of the global financial crisis, and Korea had but I just had actually I think one quarter of recession. It bounced back pretty quickly, in part because they had done some of the painful financial and banking reforms during the Asian financial
And
crisis. But nonetheless, I mean, really, since then. They've been in the, I mean, they'd like to be at about four, but two, three, maybe up to four. I mean, obviously they've got the other challenges of, demographics and it's a very challenging scene. But, semiconductors have been good for them. In some ways, the, uh, uh, the reducing dependence on China, the more secure supply chains offers Korean companies some opportunities, even as they have to sort of reduce their investment in China. So there's been some bright spots, but yeah, I think China is obviously still, I mean, South Korea's largest market, for export and largest source of imports, but it's less than it was, and with Xi Jinping, I think they were kind of going for, if you like, some of the lower hanging fruit, if you like, of I mean, because things have really been pretty chilly between China and, notwithstanding the economy, China and South Korea since the deployment of the controversy over the deployment of the THAAD missile defense, right? Back during the Park Geun-hye government 7 or 8 years ago. China punished South Korea very hard for doing that because they saw that missile defense program as a U.S. defense program aimed at China, not at North Korea. And it was a shock to the Koreans to see how hard the Chinese came down on them in terms of sanctioning them. It really, I think, in a rather, you know, lasting way,
really out of
changed
hand.
South Korean attitudes about China. But nonetheless, for example, so out of this, there were some kind of feel good and probably important things come out of the Xi Jinping Lee summit in terms of some lifting of restrictions on South Korean cultural content going to China, some return to tourism, which is, an increasingly important industry for South Korea. But and I think there'll be some more, but I think there'll be limits.
One of these articles argued that uh, Lee had established a two branch foreign policy, defense being something in which the Korea is dependent on the United States, and the other is economic policy, which he's obviously concerned about, as he must be, and the progress was made on that in the Xi Lee.
Yeah. I mean, I would say, I mean, some of you may remember Ed, and I mean, there's a four Chinese character expression the Koreans use. And I always remember if it's on me or me on me, Kyung Jung anyway, or the other way. But it's security, America, uh, America for security, China for the economy.
Yeah.
And every Korean politician, including Lee Jae-myung, will say that used to be what we could do. We can't do that anymore. Um,
Mhm.
but I mean, obviously, China is still very and very important and has that's not going to change. But sorry, there was something I was going to say. But Charles, you had your hand up
Yeah,
too.
it actually has to do with the me part of that. And,
Yeah.
and that is uh, if I remember correctly, uh, Trump has made some uh, statements to the effect that he's not so sure that he would defend the commitment to defend Korea to provide that security is now not necessarily quite as secure as it used to be. Is that a concern or a legitimate concern?
It well, I think if you look at polling in Korea and you look at the commentary in the Korean press, including from, stalwarts like the Chosun Ilbo, who's kind of, America right or wrong sometimes, there's worry. Yeah. I mean, I think the longer term trend here is, and we haven't talked so much about the security side. Pete Hegseth was also in Korea. You may have seen he was up at the DMZ, and I think there's a fact sheet about that too. Um, but certainly, the Trump administration has done a lot of things to try to reassure or rhetorically to reassure the South Koreans that we're not looking to withdraw troops now. We are looking for things like what's sometimes called more strategic flexibility. The security landscape is changing in Korea. If there was a conflict in Taiwan, how would we use U.S. troops that are on the Korean Peninsula? These are longstanding things, but they've all been raised again. This issue of operational control during wartime. So there's a number of things there, and I think they're all being handled in a way that it says this is all to strengthen, to draw us closer. And in some ways, I think they will draw us closer. But I think that longer range, what we do see is the South Koreans, and again, this has already started before, and under a progressive government, this has been part of a progressive party's stated plans over the years, greater South Korean autonomy, less dependence on the United States. And, part of that is because there's less confidence that the US, right, will
Yeah.
be there in the way that the South Koreans might like. I think this is a trend that will continue.
The defense minister declared in a press conference that OPCON we're working to have OPCON returned to Korea in
Right.
President Lee's term. And he immediately said, wait a minute, we can't be at all sure about that. We have to spend time thinking about it, talking with the Americans and so forth. He really tried to.
Mhm.
I was amazed that his defense minister would go so far out on a limb without checking it with the boss,
Mhm.
since it is a very sensitive subject.
But there is a commitment to move forward on that. But again,
Yes,
there has
yes.
been for a very long time, and we'll see.
It's
But I
kept
think
getting,
it always gets involved in, then discussions about now we have, Japan is a part of that too. So
yeah.
it's but there is a desire to I mean, in South Korea again over through progressive or whatever. I don't like to use progressive and conservative because I don't think but anyway, through the changes of powers between the parties, increasingly South Korea has, I think, sought to have more defense capability to strengthen its defenses, to hedge a bit against maybe American unreliability. But when it comes to deterrence and things like that, of the nuclear umbrella and so on, again, the Trump administration has said the right things, but now this winds back to North Korea. There is a worry certainly the Lee Jae-myung government, as you said at the beginning, has a different approach from Yoon in the sense that they uh, would would are explicitly open to trying to re-energize some kind of dialogue with North Korea. But what they really don't want to do is have Trump there without them there. right? So Lee Jae-myung, you probably saw this. I mean, it was quite clever. I don't know who came up with it, maybe, but he said to Trump when they first met, he said, on North Korea, we really, admire everything you've done. First, a lot of flattery. You are the only one. And this, if you can just solve North Korea, you will get the Nobel Peace Prize, and I will nominate you for it. And we're there. But so, President Trump, you are the peacemaker, and we, the South Koreans, are the pacemaker. Um, which to me is don't go ahead without us. You know,
Yeah. Don't go too
we're going to
fast.
be
We're
right there
setting
by
the
your
pace.
side. We're your pacemaker. We're not going to hold you back. We're just gonna be there to keep the pace right, right? So that's their great anxiety, because and this is all, I mean, been discussed for many years. There's this worry that you oh, and I'll say something else about the Singapore statement, which is mentioned in the fact state, but there's worry that, I mean, people talk about, what would really be very disconcerting for South Koreans is, for example, kind of a separate deal made where Kim Jong-un uh, abandons his long range missile program. So therefore, his ability to reach the United States, and but freezes what he has in place. But basically, would an American president, including the sitting one, think if the U.S. was and got some kind of pledge, was no longer harmed, would there really be a credible deterrent uh, against attack of South Korea, or variations on that? But yeah, and actually it reminds me, I wanted to mention this fact sheet again. I think it was in the fact sheet. There was this reference to the Singapore summit. Which we'll remember from the Trump and the high point, I guess, of the Trump Kim Jong Un romance, and actually, it was a Korean who pointed out to me yesterday. So in Singapore, there was language about denuclearization that still occurs, denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, but it was also in Singapore when Trump agreed to suspend all military exercises,
Yeah.
uh, and he did that without consulting with the South Koreans, or for that matter, I think with his own military.
Yeah.
But and again, I mean, if you're coming to tests, I mean, I personally think there may be a time to do that, but that's also something that was pointed out to me by several Koreans. I mean, including in the government, that okay, we want to be a pacemaker on those things too, right? And just Seoul's worst night. Well, I don't know if it's his worst nightmare, but I mean, one nightmare is that, yeah, they're left out. They're left out, and I think that we see signs that obviously North Korea would be perfectly happy to see that, at least to a point. So anyway.
Uh, Diane has pointed out to me that I left out a very important uh, aspect of Kang Kyung-hwa's talk the other night, and that is that stress she put on the exporting of Korean culture. And she said that BTS is her favorite group.
RM, the guy in BTS.
And RM had the perfect metaphor for why Korean culture is so popular. It's the bibimbap metaphor, that a bunch of different not closely related tastes are mixed together and produce a wonderful combination that does not erase or do away with the taste of the individual ingredients. And she returned to that several times in the course of, and it was we kind of liked it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's that also actually kind of reminds me, if I can say, maybe of well, I mean, first of all, I always have to say with for Peace Corps volunteer, I think, you know, we sort of knew that Korea was cool before anybody else did, right? Well,
Oh, yeah,
especially
sure.
so it's kind of neat. But the other thing I was in last night, yeah, that's why it was such a Last night there's an organization, some of you may have run into it, called the Council on Korean Americans.
Yes.
And they had their gala dinner last night at the Mayflower Hotel. And I was invited. The second time I've been there, which I'm pleased. I'm not Korean American, obviously. Um, but it's just gotten bigger and bigger every year. And one of the speakers, and they have prizes and so on, and it's just, and most of the people there are now kind of, I forget, what you call the sort of the generation of people who maybe came here as young kids. So, there are a lot of people very successful professionally in their, say their 40s, maybe early 50s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and that, but many of them came, sometime before, many born here, but or came here in middle school or earlier. And several of them referred to Korean Americans as now a third culture. We've all heard third culture kids or whatever, a third culture, and they're just really. I mean, we see it in literature. I mean, some of you are on screen are much more experts in this, but I mean, in Korean American literature and cooking and all these things. But it was such a incredible celebration, I guess is all I'm really saying about it. And it made me think of like this. I did watch. I don't know if you have any of you watched the K-pop Demon Hunters thing?
No.
I watched it a little bit. Yeah, I watched it. I know it wasn't my thing. That's a Korean American thing. That's all in English.
Yeah.
And made by Korean Americans. It's and it is. It's not Korean Korean, you know. But it's taken Korea by storm.
Mhm.
It's I don't know. I don't have any wise insights on this, but it's just I was just really taken with all the energy. I will say we should get more of a chit chat here. And so, one of the people at my table, in fact, he invited me to it, and some of you may know him, David Kim. He's the son of Richard Kim, the author of
Novelist.
Lost Names and The Martyred, right? Who I
Yeah.
guess was the first novelist, you tell me, right, to Korean American to write in English. And I had only read The Martyred just a couple of years ago, fairly recently. It's such an amazing book. I never realized. I thought it was, yeah. But anyway, see David there. It was just, and he was talking about, how his father's, what books are on a lot of, I guess, curricula now and in some elementary schools and middle schools. Oh, it was nice to hear. But tell me something. I want to hear from
So,
people. What are you
have
thinking?
we,
What are you
have
hearing?
we told you everything you wanted to know?
Adi Namamanayo.
So much more to tell.
Yeah, there's hours more for us to talk.
I can throw in something on the Korean culture side. I sent copies of this article to Ed and Diane
Yeah.
and to Frank. A couple days ago, I came across an article on the BBC website. It was a very long article, and it was about a Korean TV program that I hadn't been aware of. Um, and I'm sure you, maybe others too, Kathy, know about it. It's called Reply 1988. Do you know it?
Heard of it. I have not seen it.
And
Yeah.
it talks about how influential it was in the whole course that Korean TV drama took. It changed everything in a lot of important ways. It was extremely popular in Korea, and it's had a number of programs that have come up. You know, Korea 1992 or Reply 1992. Another is sequels. That's the word I was looking for. Sequels, because it was so popular, and it's on Netflix.
Oh,
I took a look at the very first episode. One of the things that is so interesting about it is that it focuses on a family, a typical middle class family, and the relationships between the different members of the family. And it's very realistic in that respect, and gets into issues of what's going on in Korea, how the society is changing, how youth culture is changing, all of those things, it's all happening in this in this in this TV series. I looked at the very first one, and besides being very interesting, it's hilarious. It's
Yeah.
really funny.
Yeah.
Um, I recommend it. It's on Netflix, as I
I'll
say.
watch it. I'll watch it.
Part
That's great.
part part of that show was filmed in my town, and the interesting thing about it was I finally figured out why my town is no longer called what it used to be when I was there, and that's a major part of that show because that family is from that town,
What's the town?
at least according
Samundal.
to the plot. Samchampo. So they
Samundal. Yeah.
yeah Samchampo, and so they went back to Samchampo, and there was a big controversy about Samchampo was going to be subsumed by Sachan, and the local residents, including that family from who had come back from Seoul, were like incensed why they had to give up their name to Sachan because there's different style towns. So that was kind of very interesting and very entertaining, that whole show series.
Is it set in the 1980s or is it set?
Yes,
Yeah,
Okay,
in the
I gotta
80s.
watch it. Yeah. Yeah. Sounds great.
I have to leave. I got to eat dinner, but it
Yeah.
was nice talking with you folks, and appreciate all the information. It's very interesting. When you have to deal with a chaos agent who thrives on chaos, I guess it's very hard.
It's
Very
kind of
hard.
exhausting, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, very hard.
Yeah.
Good night.
Good night.
good night.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what Bruce is saying there, I just feel like I don't think that we can kind of go to any sort of status quo ante, that I mean there are sort of trends anyway, I suppose, and maybe someone could say that, Trump has just accelerated some of those trends. I think he's also just broken a lot of things. I'm trying to think about this just more broadly too, but I I think we have to start a whole rethink about American foreign policy and uh, yeah, but just we're at I'm trying to use we're at an inflection point, a milestone, something where we can't just go back and start talking about the rules-based order again or the American it's we've got to
So
think.
what do you think Kathy is going to replace it, or what I mean, is it all going to be transactional? I mean, what's going to happen?
Yeah, well, I hope not. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm kind of I'm hedging on the question by saying, I mean, I do think that as we, the United States, kind of sort ourselves out, right? I mean, to where we're headed as a country, I do think that our traditional allies and countries where we have shared a sort of an outlook of values and so on. I mean, Korea, Japan, EU countries, I mean, um, have to pick up a little bit more of the load, if you like, right? Because I guess I mean I do want to see some kind of a rules-based international order. I think it's better to have some rules and norms but it is, and those rules are going to be less and maybe as they should be, but again, less about free trade as the best thing. Let's just right. But we've got to find a way to address problems that transcend borders and common challenges. Uh, and the U.S. is, I hope, still going to come out of this a very important and strong economy and uh, but I think that yeah, it's just I see I can't we're just sending so many mixed signals now. I mean, even in this administration, I mean, they come in and sort of say, and clearly there are people in the administration who think China's it. I mean, China's the number one threat. It's all about that. And I mean, that was kind of where, Biden, in some ways, Obama were, at least rhetorically. I'm not saying that that's the right or the wrong thing. It's just that was it. We're going to pivot towards Asia. We're going to rebalance. We're going to and we're going to work with allies and partners on these things. And now we're in a place where certainly there's a lot of China hawks, if you like, within the Trump administration. There's clearly a lot of, I guess, what you just call pure isolationists within his coalition. Um, but right now it seems like what we're most likely to be doing is starting a war with Venezuela, right?
Yeah,
With,
yeah.
and what's in Trump's mind, he is the president, we can say, and thinking about Canada and Greenland, it's like this 19th century, let's put up a lot of tariffs and let's take over the Western Hemisphere and let the rest of the world go to hell. I mean, I'm getting a little bit, but I don't think that's where we're going to end up. I don't think that's where we should end up, but that's going to have an impact on uh, how things play out over the next few years, and yeah, so it's a challenge for our politicians too, right? To kind of say, we haven't even talked about the Middle East, so um, yeah, there, I think into incoherence, I can't figure it out, but we just have to kind of think at the same time. I mean, I'm trying, how do we, in relationships that I really do think are very resilient and very important, and one is clearly with South Korea, and we have a special attachment to that, but another is with Japan and some other like-minded countries. We need to keep trying to build up the resilience in those and finding some common ground. And again, looking to them in some ways to take, and I think they know to take on a little bit of a heavier load and not thinking that we're gonna lead on these things for a little while because we're not.
Of course, Canada is one of those
Canada,
countries. Mexico too, for that matter. But Canada is really an outstanding example.
right?
But it wasn't so very long ago, thinking back to the Biden administration, when everything was going in the opposite direction from what you're talking about, from what has been happening over the last, what is it now, 9 months?
Right.
Um, it's I mean, everything has just switched directions 180 degrees. But it was
Well, Trump
very
was
much,
working on that in his first administration too. So it's
well,
not
yeah, Trump, you
not a
say.
complete surprise, but
No, I'm not, absolutely. But it wasn't so very long ago that I remember
yeah,
what was it, the Pacific, Asia Pacific um, agree
Right.
pacts that were made under the Biden administration with Australia and South Korea and Japan. Um, I don't know. It seems to me that you know, maybe it's unrealistic to think it can go back again to the way it was just before, but and the kinds of points that you're making are important. But I don't know. Things have just changed so very fast from the way they used to be.
Yeah, I know. I think we're in for such a period of, right. I mean, unpredictability and disruption and and other countries have agency too. So how will, I mean, yeah, and some years ago we were saying, well, Asia, I mean, actually going all the way back to George W. Bush, we were talking about, I remember I used to have talking points about how, and it was, I believe them, they're true in a way. The kind of center of gravity is moving towards the Pacific, it's the US is has to be much more focused on the Pacific than the transatlantic relationship, the pivot to Asia, the rebalance, the Indo-Pacific, bringing in, all these kind of, I mean, strategic global things. I mean, these are trends that I think will continue in the sense that Asia clearly will shape the future in many, many ways. And what China does and what challenges it has and how it deals with them will be very important. Um, so yeah, I mean, I'm just saying I think it is good for us, even though it's incredibly hard. And I try to say this to students. I mean, fresher minds is is we have to think. I mean, much as at the end of World War II, George Kennan and George Marshall, whoever had to kind of think about, didn't get everything right. How do we want to try to position ourselves, and what are really, I mean, kind of think from the ground up a little bit again, and but also now this gets into I'm gonna try to ensure, and I know many of you are in education or have been, that we continue to try to train people in things like this, my George Kennan thing too, and knowledge of other countries, awareness of the rest of the world, what they
Peace
used to
Corps.
call area studies, Peace Corps, international students. I mean, it worries me that we don't have. I mean, I shouldn't say we don't have China experts, but I don't think we have many China experts in the US government, right? And besides, if you are a China expert, you don't have many opportunities to actually talk to people from China.
One of the China experts in the government was Matt Pottinger,
Right.
and he he's much more conservative than I am, and probably than most of us are. But he was a real expert. He is a real expert,
Yeah. Yeah.
and he had to leave. His conscience would not allow him to stay.
Right. And he was a political appointee. I mean, he was
Yeah,
brought in by the Trump
yeah,
administration.
that's
That's
right.
how things, this is a very different one. Susan Thornton, if some of you know Susan, was a leading foreign service officer, China expert, uh, nominated by Trump won to be the Assistant Secretary of State, but never got confirmed and left. So no, and plus just again, we can get into, I'm going to get into it's the moaning phase now. I guess I've been in the moaning phase for some time, but yeah, international students, exchanges, USAID, all of our, research. I mean, all those things I mean, those are the fibers and the muscle, right, that kind of bind us together and do provide some context and some resilience, and as we kind of try to figure out what's next. But no, and I mean, and I think we will maybe, not maybe we will. Well, none of that's going to go away forever, and this is not going to last forever. But I just think somehow, you know, I worry the United States is going to come out of this period of the next few years. I would say, and in relative, we're already, if you like, in relative decline, right? Because China's gotten bigger, EU's gotten bigger. That's okay. I mean, but in terms of our leadership and our role, we have to, I think, just take a clear-eyed look at where we are and really think what are our interests. In that case, I mean, maybe that's where the isolationists are coming from too. Anyway.
What does that mean? Recording stopped, recording in
I
progress. You
know, they
turned it
lost
back on,
It's
Frank?
9:30.
I didn't know it. I wasn't sure everyone could see that. I have to go meet two vice presidents of my university, so Charlie is going to be the host to thank Kathy and Ed for us. But
You can do that too, Frank.
well, I
before
want you to
leave.
be able
Yeah.
to. I want you to be able to continue to talk about things if you'd like to. But
Okay.
thanks, Kathy. Thanks, Ed.
Frank, great to see you.
Frank, good to see you
Happy
again.
Thanksgiving.
Frank.
Cheers.
Thank you.